Hey guys, this is Jerry, and this talk's probably going to go on multiple channels because it is such an honor to have Andy Pye here. This is Andy Pye, the father of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the father of MMA in China. You know, he currently is still in China promoting Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, promoting MMA, etc. So, Andy, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jerry. It's a great honor to be here, and thank you for having me. And hello to all the people watching out there on the YouTube channel.
Awesome. So, tell me
Yeah.
about your journey. You were born in America, right?
No, I was born here I was born in Taiwan.
Oh, okay. You're born in Taiwan. Okay. And when did you start
Yeah,
doing Brazilian
in
Jiu Jitsu?
Taiwan. So my family, we moved to the United States somewhere around like in the late 70s. I think because I was born in 73. I remember like celebrating my sixth birthday in the United States, right? So that would roughly put that time frame right at around 78, 79, right? And um, grew up in the States, went to school in the States, and as a kid, did all different kinds of martial arts, karate, kung fu, like the typical Chinese kid growing up in the United States, right?
Yeah.
Loved ninja movies, loved kung fu movies, loved Bruce Lee movies, and dabbled here and there. And but it wasn't until I got to college that like seriously started training jujitsu, and it was because I saw a video of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Yeah, this was in '94. This was like right after UFC 4.
Mm.
Yeah, and well, how when fighters are coming out, and they're like, they got the camera panned on them, they're coming into the ring,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm watching this thing, and Hoist Gracie is making his way out, right? And on the bottom it says from Rio de Janeiro, right? Oh, okay, yeah, Brazil, from Rio de Janeiro, fighting out of Torrance, California. I was like, whoa, Torrance, California. That's like not that far away from where I was, because I was going to school at UC Riverside, right? So it's like, wow, whoa, Torrance, California. That's not that far away from Riverside, you know. So I I just picked up the phone, right? Because I had watched all these videos. I was like, whoa, dude, this dude's amazing. You know what I mean? And so I picked up the phone and called information, right, to check on a phone number. I said, do you have anything for Gracie Jiu Jitsu or Gracie Jiu Jitsu Academy or you know? And the operator was like, hold on, here's your number. I was like, whoa, trip out, you know, right? So I called up, hello, this is the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Academy. I was like, is this the same place? Is this the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Academy where Hoist Gracie is from, where he's teaching? He's like, yep, this is the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Academy. This is where Hoist teaches. I was like, the UFC champion guy, right? Who's won all these like UFC things, and they're like, yeah, this is the one. I was like, oh my god, how do I sign up, or how do I come down and check it out? Oh, we have a free introductory class on the weekend. You can sign up, blah blah blah. So, make a long story short, I drove all the way out there from Riverside, and yeah, that's how I got started. This is like in 1994, right after UFC 4, I believe. It was right after he fought Dan Severn.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
remember your first class and how it felt?
Yeah, I fell in love with it like instantly, right? And because I was completely amazed by the um, principles behind it, and because as a kid, studying all sorts of different martial arts, um, none of the martial arts provided a comprehensive strategy for how to approach self-defense. You know what I mean? Like all of the martial arts that I did were like, man, I want to try to be politically correct. I don't want to bash any martial arts, but it's, you know what I mean? But it's hard not to bash, or it's hard to not sound like I'm bashing on the martial arts. That's not what I'm trying to do. I guess what I'm saying is that Jiu-Jitsu was the only martial art that gave a practical sort of blueprint for how to approach self-defense against someone who is bigger, stronger, and heavier. You know what I'm saying? Right? Because let's say you're a kickboxer, right? You study kickboxing, right? What's the strategy for fighting a guy who's bigger, stronger, heavier besides just doing the same that you've been doing? Right? Just punching him and kicking him faster or harder, or more movement, or what? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? Jiu-Jitsu was the only one that said no. You avoid doing what he wants to do, right? And put him into a situation where he's completely lost, right? I'm sure you've heard this term, Jean-Jacques Machado, right? He said, Jiu-Jitsu is a lot like swimming in the ocean, right? And Jiu-Jitsu guys are the sharks, and most people don't even know how to swim, right? So even if you get a bigger, stronger guy, even if he's not trained, like in any sort of striking, just by default, because of the way that human beings are biomechanically like built, right? People are still going to use their hands and fists. You know what I mean? No one's gonna punch you in their face with their ass, right? It's not right. It's not biomechanically right. No one's gonna use their neck to punch you in the face, right? So people are going to use their fists, they're going to use their elbows. This is like, you don't need to be taught that, you know what I mean? That concept, right? You need to be taught how to do it well. You need to be taught how to do it efficiently, right? But even a child, if you go to, I don't want to say kindergarten, but even kids when they're fighting at school, kids that are not trained, they know to use their fists to strike each other.
Yeah, like this.
It's a basic human instinct. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like Jiu-Jitsu is totally, I want to say, counterintuitive, right? Leverage is not so intuitive, right? But once you see it, once you learn about leverage, then it becomes a lot more obvious. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
what were some of the submissions, or what were some of the moves that you really enjoyed learning, or that like Oh, there it is. Yeah, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
I gotta represent. Yeah, I gotta represent.
Nice. So, how long did it take you for you to feel like you were kind of starting to swim a little bit?
Wow. Good question. I think just to explain a bit, I remember like in the very, very, like the very first couple of months, maybe first month or second month, I remember we had a class. It was a beginner's class, and there was a girl who was a blue belt, right? And I don't know how, maybe she was just like taking a beginner's class, I don't know. But anyways, my point is that I remember doing like drills with her, just like really simple drills, right? Just escaping the mount and things like this. And she was smaller than me, but I couldn't escape from underneath the mount. You know what I'm saying? Right? And I would, she'd catch me in a choke, or she'd catch me in an armbar. And I was like, I can't believe this, I'm probably like, 20 kilos heavier, right? But she had technique, you know what I mean? So it really sort of opened my eyes to, about just how amazing, martial arts can be if you're trained correctly, right? And the most amazing thing for me about jiu-jitsu is how you can defend yourself and how you can subdue your attacker without hurting him, right? And this, I think, has a lot of parallels to Chinese martial art, wushu, wude, right? Martial morality, so to speak. You know what I mean, right? If you're obviously superior to somebody else, there's no use in. I mean, it's not considered morally correct to hurt this other person. He's dumb, right? But just because he's dumb doesn't mean he deserves to have his ribs broken or have his face smashed in. You know what I mean? And jiu-jitsu, I think, is like, that's what amazed me about jiu-jitsu when Royce won all those fights, is that he won the majority of his fights without hurting any of his opponents. Right? Yeah. That's what was cool. Sorry, back to your question. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how long it took. I think maybe it was like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months before I caught somebody in my first submission. And I remember it really clearly. It was a triangle. Yeah. And the guy was bigger than me, and I caught him in a triangle, and he tapped. And I remember really clearly because the way that he was positioned, he had his hand stuck, and when he tapped me on the face because that's where his hand was. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he tapped. Man, this stuff really works, because it was the same submission that I saw Royce use against Dan Severn. Right? Are you familiar with that fight?
Yes, I remember that fight. And Dan Severn didn't know really how to tap, so he slammed the ground. He was like, these massive taps. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was I clearly remember the first submission that I ever caught somebody with. It was a triangle, from my back against the bigger guy. He tapped me in the face. I think that was right around the 4 months or 5 months mark.
I see. And when did you get your blue belt?
I think I got my blue belt. I started I can't remember when in '94. It had to have been sometime. I think it was like, I want to say it was like sometime around April or May, because I remember it was like getting close to the summer. Okay. Because I was still in class at the time. But I think it took me like maybe 6 months. 6 months, 7 months. Yeah. I got my blue belt.
And when you decided to go to China, were you a blue belt or a purple belt? I forgot the details.
No. I was a blue belt at that time. Because I came to China right around the end of 1997. So I was a blue belt in 1997. Yeah.
Wow. So you were the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt in China.
I was the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person, period, in China. Yeah. And just as a quick note, I was a blue belt for like 8 years. I was wearing a blue. I should say it like this because it makes it sound more correct. I was wearing a blue colored belt for 8 years before I started wearing a purple colored belt. Right? Now, what that means, what you want to take from that, it's up to you. What does that mean? Yeah.
So tell me about when you were in China and you started your martial arts journey there. You realized, wow, I'm the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person ever. Did it immediately occur to you, I need to start teaching people this, or did it kind of come later?
No. So this is what happened. I always had this impression that China was like a huge, like, martial arts country. That everybody, I grew up in the States. I had never been, before I moved back to China in 1997, I had never been to China in my life, right? And Taiwan and China are really, really different, So I grew up in the United States watching, like, David Carradine on Kung Fu. Right? So that's what I thought China was like. You know what I mean? Watching Bruce Lee movies. That's what I thought China was like. Right? So I mean, obviously China's not like that, right? So when I got back, I was thinking, oh yeah, I'll just find another jiu-jitsu club to train at, jiu-jitsu academy to train at, right? And bro, there's no jiu-jitsu academies. There weren't even commercial martial arts gyms. Like if you wanted to train martial arts, you had to like go to, a government sports school, right, to learn sanda, right, or to learn wushu, you know. And there were people. I mean, not that there weren't commercial martial arts, but not like how we understand commercial martial arts to be in the West. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like you had masters, right, who sort of kind of went into hiding during the Cultural Revolution, right? They didn't come out. You know what I mean? Because no one wanted to like advertise that they knew kung fu during the Cultural Revolution. You know what I mean? Right? So, and then a lot of those masters, maybe they died afterwards, right? And then, because this is like 20, 30 years down the line now, this is way, way later. You know what I mean? Right? So, then whoever they passed their like techniques and lineage to, like it's not like those people were opening commercial gyms, right? Because think about how the Chinese economy didn't really even open up until like in the late 80s, early 90s, right?
Yeah.
So then where do these people teach? They taught, maybe in the park, right? On the weekend with some friends, you know what I mean? And some disciples, right? Or maybe there's like kind of maybe, I don't know, in a courtyard somewhere, right? But it wasn't like a commercial martial arts gym like how you and I understand what a commercial martial arts gym to be in the United States. It's not like you can just walk up and, oh, here's the sign for the martial arts club. Oh yeah, okay, I go in. Oh, hey, can I have a free class? Can I sign up? And no, it was always through some kind of, guanxi, right? Some relationship that they had to introduce you to for you to meet the master, for you to be accepted by the other disciples. There's a lot of politics involved. So when I got to Beijing in 1997, I went around looking for like martial arts gyms, and we're talking about a city of 20 million people, yeah. And I looked everywhere, okay, right? I couldn't find one commercial martial arts gym except for one Sanda club, okay, which was opened by a foreigner, by a buddy of mine. Later on, we became good friends, okay, Derek Cope, right, who was training with the Beijing Sanda team, yeah. He like rented a little tiny, it was probably like, I don't know, not even 100 square meters, right? And he had some mats on the ground, and he was teaching Sanda, right, on the north side of the Fourth Ring Road. Okay, back then there weren't even tall buildings on the Fourth Ring Road. It was just like regular, single level housing, ping pong. You see what I'm saying? And he was the first guy that I met. It was a foreigner in Beijing who opened a commercial martial arts school that was open to anyone and everyone to just walk in. You didn't have to like, right? Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some guys would say, oh no, we had this and that. Okay. Hey, look, if I didn't find you, I didn't find you. I'm sorry. I take that back. But Derek, I looked in a lot of places. And as far as I know, like Derek was the first one to open a martial arts club. And I also knew another guy, a Chinese guy, who's also a good friend of mine, who's also a student of mine. He opened the first commercial boxing gym in Beijing. Yeah, in Beijing. And this was like in 1990. This was before I got to Beijing. He did it in like 1995 or maybe 94, 95. The Bison Boxing Club, boxing gym. And but yeah, well, everywhere I looked, there was basically no gyms. So I wanted to train, right? So the only way for me to train was to grab my friends and be like, "Hey, you want to learn jiu-jitsu?" Right? And in order for me to have good training partners, I had to make sure that they knew everything that I knew, and I had to make sure that they knew how to defend against whatever it is that I was doing. and also that they were sufficiently good enough to put me into bad positions, or you know what I'm saying. So my teaching career kind of like came out of a need for it was my own selfish need to want to train jiu-jitsu, right, against other people who also knew jiu-jitsu. So that's kind of how it started.
I see. Now,
Yeah.
was it easy for you to find students initially?
Among foreigners, yeah, it was really easy. It's just I just go to my friends, right? No, I don't want Andy. I don't want to learn jiu-jitsu, dude. Come on, please, just come down and train, dude. Just help me with just help me break a sweat, or you know what I mean. I promise I'll go easy on you. And no, you're gonna. I said, no. Yeah, I would just start with my friends. Just start with my friends and get them. Try to build their sort of like enthusiasm for jiu-jitsu, right? So it wasn't like trial by fire, you know what I'm saying? Right? It wasn't like throwing them into the pit and having them claw their way out. That's the best way to lose students quickly. So once that happened, like in China, there tends to be sort of like this. There sort of tends to be like it's fashionable to do what foreigners are doing. You see what I'm saying? So if foreigners all go to this one bar, then like one by one, you'll see like Chinese people going to check it out. They're like, oh yeah, hey, a lot of foreigners going to this bar. I wonder if it's any good. Oh, hey, a lot of foreigners going to this one restaurant. And it's also the other way around, right? Foreigners like, hey, yeah, there's a lot of Chinese people going to this one restaurant. It's a really good, authentic Chinese restaurant. And that also brings in foreigners. You know what I mean? So it kind of feeds off each other. But what was happening was, so there started to be a buildup of like foreigners training where we were training at, right? And this caused the Beijing martial arts community to take a look and be like, hey, let's go check it out, right? So it kind of fed off each other. And then eventually I became friends with an official from the Central Administration of Sport, the Wushu Administration Center, and Mr. Liu Pulei, really nice guy, and he's a master of Yi Quan. Okay. Oh no, sorry, Xing Yi Quan. Mm-hmm. Right, Yi Quan. I can't remember if it's Yi Quan or Xing Yi Quan, right? A Chinese martial arts form, and he had a lot of knowledge, a lot of background, and a lot of connections in the local Chinese martial arts community. And then, and through him, I met a lot of other friends. And also, there was a small but growing number of Chinese martial artists who knew about the UFC, right? And who were also like, their friends would mail them like black belt magazines and things like this. And and slowly but surely, that's kind of how jiu-jitsu grew.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the first place you trained, was it just kind of like a building you rented out, or was it like a place a friend of yours had or something? How did you find that first initial place to like set up a studio?
Well, remember I told you about my friend Derek, right? The guy who opened the Sanda place, right? He eventually became a manager of a gym in Beijing, which is kind of towards downtown. And incidentally, it just happened to be, like 2 blocks away from where I lived. I could literally walk to it in under 10 minutes, right? So for me, it was super convenient. I was like, hey, Derek, man, you're set up here now. And Derek always liked to train. He always liked to stay in shape himself. So he's like, yeah, I got this space over here. It's not being used, right? It's a multi-purpose, right? People were doing like yoga in there, and they were right. And he had all these mats. So he said, look, we'll just come in on, for example, Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, right? And then we'll use it from this time to that time. And yeah, that's how we did it. So we just used his place. our fight is not the first MMA fight in China. It's not the first. It might have been the first display of technical jiu-jitsu, but it wasn't the first MMA fight in China. Okay? And what happened was during the summer, there was another one of these like events where people got together and just fought. I wasn't in Beijing at that time. One of my students went and fought against somebody from Xu Xiaodong's camp. Okay? It was fought to a draw. There was no winner, and it wasn't exactly a brilliant display of jiu-jitsu. In my student's defense, the other dude was a lot bigger. For a guy who wasn't that well trained in jiu-jitsu, he had been only doing jiu-jitsu for like not even a year, and being smashed on his back the whole time, he defended himself perfectly. He didn't take any damage. I can honestly say that if he didn't know jiu-jitsu, he would have had his ass handed to him. He would have been like in serious trouble because he would have just been like pinned on the ground and just had his face bashed in. You know what I'm saying? But he was able to defend himself, didn't give any space, was always changing angles. And the people who organized that event, they contacted me. They're like, we're getting ready to do another one of those things. And, we're wondering if maybe, you'd like to represent jiu-jitsu. Yeah, okay. I'll do it. Number one, I saw the fight that my student did that at the last event. And I was like, man, if people see that and they see jiu-jitsu, they're not going to really, they're not going to say, wow, that's something that we want to train. Even though my student did a great job at defending himself, right? But it just, come on, you're pinned on the ground. It just like from a spectator standpoint, it wasn't like spectacular. By 2003, I had been training jiu-jitsu for 6-7 years. If you started training jiu-jitsu at the time that I started training jiu-jitsu, which is the early days of the UFC and the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy, then everybody who started jiu-jitsu back then learned jiu-jitsu because they wanted to know how to defend themselves in a real fight. It wasn't because they wanted to score 2 points or 3 points or 4 points. And, like that wasn't even popular that didn't even exist, I don't think. So they said, hey, you want to represent jiu-jitsu? You want to come fight? And I said, man, I want to test myself. I got to see if this works. At least once in my life, I got to see if jiu-jitsu works. So I agreed. Then the opponent that they paired me with was with Xu Xiaodong. So yeah, we fought. At the end, I caught him with an arm bar. And what maybe a lot of people don't realize is that in the opening like 3 seconds of the fight, he throws a high roundhouse kick, and he breaks my forearm on the left side of my arm. He not clean through, but just the outside bone, and which is why you don't see me throwing any strikes at all with a left hand. There was a period of time on the ground where he caught me in like a head and arm guillotine, and the only way for me to get out was to throw these little rabbit punches. But they don't really do anything. Every time I punched, I could feel the bone moving inside my forearm. It was quite painful. So it was pretty ineffective. Then when I finally got to the mount, I just tapped him a few times because it was. The thing is that match was being broadcast by Beijing Sports Channel, BTV6. BTV6 is the sports channel for Beijing television. It already looks bad if you're mounted on somebody bashing their face in. You know what I'm saying? I wanted people to see the fight. I didn't want BTV to censor it. So rather than punching him too hard in the face, I tried to smother him so that he would push me. Because I knew that if he pushed me, he'd have to straighten his arm.
Yeah, that's right.
And if he straightened his arm, he'd give me a chance to armbar it. Right? So these were all things that I thought about before going to the fight. My goal was to show people that jiu-jitsu was an awesome martial art, that you could use it to defend yourself, and that it's not violent. It's not violent. If you look at the fight, I got more hurt than he did. So yeah, that's how that happened. And I think that's probably the first time that people in China were introduced to jiu-jitsu. Right? The Gracie style. I don't even say it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I say it's the Gracie style of Jiu-Jitsu. Because most people in China, when they think of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they think of it in a gi with passing for 2 points and butt scooting. That's what they think about. That's what they think Jiu-Jitsu is. Yeah, but it's not. That's not what Jiu-Jitsu is.
I don't think any of us on Fight Commentary Breakdowns or any of the channels knew that it was broadcast on television. The match was broadcast on television, which makes me
think... It wasn't a live...
Go ahead.
It wasn't a live broadcast, right? It was... They had to, you had to submit it ahead of time to censors, right? Because all TV stations in China are they're like state TV stations. They're all owned by the government. So you had to get it past censors. Now, having said that, if the censor approves of it, it's going on TV. I knew that we had a chance to get it on TV, right? So, because there was a guy from BTV there who was filming everything.
Did you see your students, the number of students for your Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school? Did you see them increase a lot after you went on television?
Yeah, sure. After it was on television, definitely it helped with the bringing more students in, with promoting jiu-jitsu in China. Definitely.
You had this first fight, you won, and then you started getting more students. What made you then decide to start Art of War?
So right after the fight, I go to the hospital. The doctor tells me, he x-rays the arm because it was all swollen, you know what I mean? And so he x-rays the arm and he's like, yeah, it's broken. I was like, what? Yeah, it's broken. At that time, it wasn't like because I had never broken a bone in my body before. So I didn't know what a broken bone felt like. During the fight itself, it was painful, and I didn't know it was broken. To be honest, it was my first MMA fight. It was a total spur of the moment thing. Like, it was almost kind of stupid that I did that. But when you're younger, you are kind of stupid, and you want to test yourself and do crazy things. The doctor told me that I wasn't going to be able to train 100 days. 伤筋动骨100天. I had it in a cast. If I'm not able to get on the mat, I get like super antsy. You know what I mean? So I was like, if he would have kicked me in the head, like, he for sure would have knocked me out. Who knows what kind of damage he could have done. The only doctor that was at the event was a doctor that I brought to the event. I brought a doctor thinking, man, what if something happens to me, right? Or to somebody else, right? And if there's no doctors there, if something bad happens, right, then like the Beijing city government receives like a notice from the police that said, oh, there's some kind of underground like fight club that gets these dudes together and fight, and then somebody was killed. That's the end of jiu-jitsu. That's the end of MMA. It's done. And by that time, I had 6 years tried to promote jiu-jitsu and try to get students and tell everybody that this is a great thing. And then now suddenly the news comes out that some guy died in one of these things. No, I wasn't going to have that. That's why I had to bring a doctor, because there was a ton of people at that. We were at an Aikido dojo. It was like a neutral location, right? It wasn't my place. It wasn't Xu Xiaodong's place. It was at a neutral location. So I thought, man, these things, these little like smoker events, whatever you want to call them, like, people really like these things. It's not more dangerous than boxing. It's not more dangerous than wrestling. It's not, right? It's comprehensive. You just put everything together. You know what I mean? And given that martial arts has a really rich tradition in China, I thought, man, if these things continue, and they continue without the supervision of a doctor, without the supervision of real judges, okay, without the supervision of pre-fight medicals, if these things continue without these things, somebody's going to get seriously hurt for sure. 100%. 100%. So I can't let that happen. I can't let people think. I can't let the Beijing government, I can't let the Chinese government think that what I'm trying to promote is stupid, doesn't take into consideration all these safety factors, and is a violent and barbaric sport. The same considerations that the UFC had in the early days were the same considerations that I had. So what I did was I sat down and I started to write a business plan. First event we did was at the Beijing Sports University, and we did it inside their it was in their boxing training hall. Right. So it wasn't even in a real venue. It was where the boxing team for the Beijing Sports University is where they trained. Right. Just like a little gym, I think the gym was like it was not even 1,000 square meters. Maybe it was like 10,000 square feet or 12,000 square feet. It wasn't that big. Right. It had a boxing ring set up in the middle. Okay. So imagine like 3 boxing rings. The gym could fit 3 Olympic sized boxing rings. That's how big the gym was. The boxing ring was in the middle, and then on the either side was like the area the size of a boxing ring where you could sit people. Yeah, so it wasn't that big at all. We maybe had 200 people, 200 spectators. I remember on the day of, there was a line, a group of people waiting outside the Beijing Sports University, wanting to come into the training hall to watch. We were already maxed out. You know what I mean? And like campus security were like, we're gonna shut you guys down if you guys don't do anything. You know what I mean? I was like, we're not letting people in. We're maxed out. There's no more seats. There's not even standing room. Don't shut us down because you guys can't control the crowd outside, right? We can't control the crowd outside. This is your campus, right? You have to control the crowd outside. We had to talk to the school officials, and students ended up climbing trees so they could see into the window from, like, you know, the trees up here, like the wind. So they had to climb a tree to see over the crowd of people inside. They were looking in through the window, right? But if they were down here, they could only see the backs of the heads of the people standing. So they were climbing trees to look down into the window of the boxing ring. We looked out. There's people on the roofs of like the portables, like next to the gym, all trying to peek through the windows. We set up like a makeshift locker room on one side with partitions. And I remember going back there to find some towels or whatever. And there's like guys trying to climb in through the windows from where we had made a locker room. Wow. You know, that's how badly they wanted to see the fight. I think we had 10 fights that day. Then we had, and it was the first official MMA debut of Zhang Tietuan, who was the first Chinese fighter in the UFC. A lot of other pretty good Chinese MMA fighters who later on, you know, really made a mark. Chinese MMA, the first generation of Chinese fighters. And yeah, remember I told you I have that friend inside the China Wushu Administration Center, right? So he helped us tap into all these contacts within the local martial arts community. And because the sports administration, they're all connected. All the guys from Sandan know the guys from wrestling, from boxing, from Taekwondo, you know. So it was easy for us to get in contact with athletes, with combat sports athletes. And also it was easy for us to get into contact with people who had been training traditional martial arts. So we'd say, hey, anybody who wants to come train, then, you know, you guys can come train. Sorry, not train, but come compete. Mm-hmm. You know, now, these are the rules, and they're basically Vale Tudo rules. Yeah, Vale Tudo rules. And if I remember correctly, 10 minutes and 5 minutes. First round is 10 minutes. Second round is 5 minutes. Okay, to a draw. No points. Okay, if there's no KO, if there's no submission, there's no winner. Okay, so if you want to win, you have to submit the other guy, or you have to stop the other guy. There's got to be KO, TKO, submission. Stomps were allowed. Yeah, it was Vale Tudo. And I think the only thing that we couldn't do was we couldn't strike to the back of the head, to the back of the neck, to the back of the head. I think no shots to the kidney. Everything else, soccer kicks, no problem. Elbows on the ground, no problem. Knees to the head on the ground, no problem. It's a fight. No points to a draw. KO, TKO, submission, or draw. Yeah, that was our first event. Because of the old UFCs, that's number one. Because of my background from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy, that's what I thought real fights should be. Number two, these guys were getting ready to fight in the URCC in the Philippines, okay? And Alvin Aguilar, okay, in the Philippines, in his event, it was 2 10-minute rounds to a draw. So I was only doing 10 minutes, 5 minutes, okay? That guy was doing 2 10 minutes to a draw. Wow. Basically, Art of War 1 was like a testing for the guys that I was training to go overseas to fight in like the most hardcore rule set, you know, in Asia at that time. So I wanted the guys that I was training to be prepared to fight in that kind of environment. If you're fighting in like unified rules and you suddenly go to Pride, dude, it's a big wake up call. You know, they put you on your back and then suddenly there's like knees flying in your face. You know what I mean?
So this event, was it broadcast on television too?
Yes, yes,
On the
yes.
Beijing television. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not just Beijing television, but in a lot of smaller satellite TV stations all across the country, all across the country. This was like the beginning of MMA, the MMA movement to go from, just a fringe sport, right, to getting on television. This really was the beginning of it.
How many Art of Wars did you put on it? Is this still going on?
We've done 18 shows so far. Right now, we're not doing any shows. Big shows, all they do is burn money. So we don't want to do any of these shows that – it makes no sense to do big shows that burn money. There's a lot of events in China right now, and it seems that their philosophy is, if we just burn enough money, we'll start making money, right? I don't believe that if we just burn enough money, we'll start making money. I don't believe that, right? But there are people who believe that, if we just burn enough money, right? If we just outburn everyone else, right? And everyone else goes out of business and we're the only ones left burning money, then people will have no choice but to look at us, right? And I don't believe that that's the right way to do business. So that's not what we're going to do, right? We got to be smart, and there's there's lots of promotions that have a lot of money that they can just burn.
Yeah.
But that's not, I don't think that's the right thing to do.
So now you still teach, right? You still teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, I don't call it Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I just call it Jiu Jitsu.
Oh yeah, Jiu Jitsu. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because you learned the Gracie Jiu Jitsu, which is kind of different from what currently now people think of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Yeah.
When people nobody in Brazil calls it Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Yeah. Right? People in Brazil just call it Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah.
Right? So it wasn't until it came to the United States and Americans and Brazilians, they wanted to differentiate that from the existing traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu that was in the United States, right? That they started calling it Brazilian jiu-jitsu because they couldn't call it Gracie jiu-jitsu either, right? Because that name was trademarked, right? Mm-hmm. And not all of them were doing Gracie style jiu-jitsu, right? There was a lot of sport jiu-jitsu champions who came over saying, "Oh yeah, what we're doing is the same as self-defense. Well, it's the same as MMA," and I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's the case at all.
Where do you see kind of MMA going in China? Is it just going to get bigger? Is it, as traditional martial arts gets bigger too? Is it going to is there going to be like a fusion Chinese kind of MMA system? Where do you see it going?
Well, there already is a fusion Chinese MMA system. There's I don't know how familiar you are with Sanda. Probably pretty familiar, right? But Sanda is a combination of punching, kicking, and throws, takedowns, right? So that's why you see a lot of Chinese Sanda fighters, okay, making a transition over to MMA. Yeah, because all they need to do is learn how to defend themselves on the ground, right? Then they just stand up quickly, right? If you look at all of Tie Chuan, he was a stand-up fighter, right? And Wang Guan was a stand-up fighter, right? Both from Xi'an Sports University, right? Xi'an Sports Institute. What other Chinese fighters are there in the UFC? Li Jingliang, right? He was doing wrestling before, but later on converting to Sanda, right? So he has a Sanda background. And Zhang Weili, same thing, Sanda, right? So why? Because Sanda is the competitive sport of Chinese martial art. Right, where they actually punch and kick each other, right? In trying to knock each other out or trying to score points, right? Sanda is the closest thing to combat that we have in China, right? There's a lot of traditional martial artists that will disagree. That's fine, with but that's a different subject, right? That's a different subject,
Exactly.
right? But yeah, that's a different subject,
So, you're in China, you're teaching and promoting jiu-jitsu and putting on Art of War events. Did you return back to the U.S. to keep learning jiu-jitsu? How did your jiu-jitsu journey evolve as you're kind of promoting jiu-jitsu and teaching jiu-jitsu in China?
At that time, I was still traveling, right? So every time I would travel overseas, I would bring my gi with me, right? So even before I got to wherever I was, okay, I would look up if there's any jiu-jitsu academies close by the hotel, right, or close by the office, or close by whatever it is that I had to do while I was there. So anytime I traveled, I would continue to train. I've only been back to the United States, 4 or 5 times, not more than 5 times, since the year 2000. Right. So the majority of my traveling has been throughout Asia. Right. And I've also brought guys out for seminars and stuff. The majority of my training, though, is done with my students. Yeah. See, at some point, you train jiu-jitsu, yeah?
I did, and I'll probably get back into it eventually.
Yeah, definitely you should. After this quarantine, get back on the mat. But like at some point, maybe you start off as a teacher and you're teaching students, right? But at some point, their skill level will get to, because their skill level is going like this, whereas your skill level, because as you accumulate more knowledge, it's not, jiu-jitsu is not endless, right? It's not endless. There's not an infinite number of moves, right? There's not an infinite number of combinations, right? At some point, based on you're limited by your body shape, you're limited by your philosophy, you're limited by all these. There's limitations. So, if you started off with a good instructor, then maybe you have less, limitations. If you started off with a really horrible instructor, then you probably have more of these limitations. But in terms of your own students, at some point, your students will reach a skill level where they're no longer your students. They're training partners. I mean, if you're teaching correctly, if you're doing it correctly. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Right? And if you're doing it correctly, your students should be your best training partners. Right? Because they should know everything you know, except better. You understand what I'm saying? Because you're teaching them how to like defend against your best technique. You're teaching them how to attack your biggest weakness. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? So at some point, they're going to get to a level where they're the ones who should be giving you the most difficulty. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because in 2005, it's a really funny question. I asked Rickson Gracie this question. I said, Master Rickson, I have this problem here in Beijing because, I don't have super high level training partners, and if I don't have anybody to smash me, right? How is it that I'm able to get any better, right? And he replied in a really, really funny way. He said, Andy, I've had this same problem for the last 30 years. I've had this same problem for the last 30 years. And so and then he started talking to me about like his training methodologies, right? So he said, look, if you can't find anybody to smash you, then let the guy smash you. Just let him smash you, right? And, you know, try to escape, right? But only using one arm. Or try to escape using no arms. Right? You know, put a guy on your back, let him put his hand in, right? Let him grab the other collar, and then try to escape, right? Don't stop his hand before it grabs your collar. Let him grab your collar, right? Put yourself as deep as you can, right? So deep that even a white belt on his first day can finish you. You understand what I'm saying? Right? Because come on, you know, if let me give you an example, right? So let's say you've been training for 20 years, right? And you have a guy in front of you who's like 40 kilograms heavier than you, okay? It's his first day. Sorry, but he's not going to put you in an armbar. It's impossible, especially if it's his first day, right? It doesn't matter that he's 40 kilograms heavier, okay? But imagine you lie down, you give him your arm, okay? And you allow for him to extend it almost fully straight, okay? Maybe not fully straight, but almost fully straight, okay? And you tell him, make sure you keep my thumb pointing straight up and my elbow straight down. You show him exactly where that fulcrum is. And then you say, okay, I'm going to try to escape. I'm betting you a lot of black belts who've been training for 20 years wouldn't be able to do it. Right? Now, if it's locked like this, that's different. If it's not extended, if it's locked like this, right? So what I'm saying is that if you allow yourself to be put into that situation where that thing is almost like 99% locked out, even against a guy who doesn't have that much experience, because it's so deep already, right? And because he's got strength and you know, maybe, you know, explosiveness or whatever, because of that situation, it's much easier for that guy to finish you, right? So you have to put yourself into situations where the other guy can finish you and then get out of it. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Wow.
You know, and if you do that, then it's like, if you're ever put into that situation, it doesn't come as a shock to you, right? You don't panic. That's what happens when you get submitted, when you panic, right? Imagine when you start off as a white belt and a guy with experience, he mounts you, right? What do? You do all sorts of stupid stuff. Yeah. Right? And the reason you do stupid things is because you panic, right? And because you panic, you're willing to do anything to get out of that situation, including doing the wrong stuff, right? Why? Because you don't know that it's wrong, right? Why? Because you're under anxiety, you're under stress, you're panicking, so you're just doing anything, right? But if you can first learn to harness that mental anxiety, right? And the only way to harness that is to put yourself into that situation so many times that it doesn't faze you anymore, right? You know, like good boxers, they don't even move when you punch them in the face, right? But guys who've just started training on their first day, you punch them in the face, they turn their backs. Yeah. They'll give you their back, right? And the reason that experienced boxer doesn't turn his back is because he's been punched in the face so many times in training, he's used to it. Yeah. He's used to it. So, you know, you punch him in the face in a match, man, it's happened so many times that it doesn't even faze him, right? So by putting yourself, I'm sure you've heard this term, yeah, you know, you learn from tapping. You learn from tapping, right? Definitely. If the only way to learn how to defend an armbar is to be put into an armbar so many times that this, the way that he has it positioned now, this is dangerous, right? Like put, grab, now we're talking technically about jiu-jitsu, but I'll give you another example. If a guy puts his hand into your collar, one hand in your collar, right? Some guys will immediately take that hand and pull it out, right? Some guys will immediately do that, right? And a guy with experience, he might not even do anything because he can feel that the way that you grabbed it poses no threat to him, right? So it doesn't matter that your hand is there. You won't be able to choke him. He can feel it. Why? Because he's been choked so many times, right? But guys who haven't been choked that much, the second your hand grabs that collar, he feels danger. Why? Because he doesn't know any better, right? So that's what I mean by giving yourself that handicap, right?
So what is the day in the life of Andy like? What is it like right now for you? Right now there's a lockdown, but before the lockdown, what was the day in life like for you?
So before the lockdown, we had just got back from Abu Dhabi at the World Jiu Jitsu Championships. Okay, I am currently the coach of the national team.
Wow.
And so China now has a national Jiu Jitsu team. Okay, so we competed. We brought like 20 athletes. We got 2 7th place trophies, if you will. Placed 7th. Not bad for people who haven't been doing jiu-jitsu that long and competed for the very first time at that level. Obviously, it's there's a ton of room for improvement, right? So basically, my goal, so to speak, is to prepare the Chinese team to compete at least until the Asian Games, which is coming up in 2022, right? So jiu-jitsu is in the Asian Games. The Asian Games in 2022 will be in Hangzhou, right? Hangzhou, China. Okay. At the end of this year, if it's not delayed, Hainan Sanya Asian Beach Games also has jiu-jitsu. Okay, will be hosted by China.